What made you quit a job on the first day? Worked 2 days at a car wash. Day 2, saw a customer hand the manager a tip for the guy who had just finished cleaning the interior. The guy who had cleaned it went inside for a drink of water as the customer was taking a second. Anyways, the manager pocketed the tip and told the employee that he got stiffed. Told my new coworker, told the manager I changed my mind about working there and never went back. I got a job working on the bins, going around in the truck picking up trash around town. On my first day, I was assigned to my crew, who turned out to all be fucking marathon runners who used the job to train. The driver would drive around town, never stopping, and the crew would run alongside non-stop for 8 fucking hours, throwing the trash in as we went. I am a big guy, I am not designed to run for 8 hours. I almost died about 10 times. Fantastic guys, top blokes, but sod that. I made my excuses at the end of the shift and never went back and got some contract work at a factory instead the next day. They lied to me about what I was doing. I was told I would be given an office, instead I was put in a closet with 6 interns. They did not have enough equipment for me, so I had to share a computer with someone else. It was a computer-related job. I work in a casino. We had a new employee and we were teaching her blackjack, which is probably the simplest game we offer. She quit after the first hour because she didn't think there'd be so much math. Apparently, counting to 21 is hard. Wanna play Connect 4? I dunno, that's a lot of math. You just have to count to 4. A lot of times, though. Last year I got a job which involved me dressing up as a Disney princess for kids' parties. I fit into the costumes fine. On my first day my boss told me I was just to dress in plain clothes and paint the kids' faces. I asked her why I wasn't to dress up and she said you need to lose a bit of weight to look like a realistic Disney princess. You can wear the dresses when you have lost more weight. I never went back. Worked in a cafe as a teenager as a server. On my first day, they threw me into the lunch rush with no training. We also had not done my hiring paperwork, but that's another story. Then they got mad at me because I was too slow and not doing things right. I left after less than 2 hours. I also worked at Walmart for about a month, not a day, I know, but quit because a guy started stalking me, coming into my department every day, asking my work hours, where I lived, what my phone number was. He followed me home on the bus one day, but there were tons of people around, so I ran home and luckily he couldn't follow me. Filed a police report, but the Walmart security wouldn't do anything for me. So I quit. Similar thread 25 days ago. This was my post. I worked at a Chinese restaurant for 1 shift. I was 15 and it was my first real job other than paper route or mowing lawns. I bussed tables for about 4 hours. When things finally slowed down, the owner came to me and said, "You punch out now. Clean high chairs and go home." Okay. I replied and started in on the high chairs with a spray bottle and rag. No. Punch out first, then clean high chairs. PSH. That's not how it works here in America. If I punch out, I'm going home. You know, clean high chair, you know, come back. Fine. Peace out, Mr. Miyagi. I'll be back on Friday to get my check. At 18 I worked as a handicapped light bulb telemarketer. 2 shady guys asked me during my interview if I had ever been hurt. They wanted me to say yes, so I did. Then they asked if it still hurts, again I said yes. They hired me on the spot. The next morning I was in a dimly lit room with 10 other people. They tore apart a phone book and had me calling customers reading a script. The script went something like this: I am handicapped and I am selling light bulbs for a living. They last a long time. Would you like to buy some? I left after the first break. Ironically, if it was held in a dimly lit room, you probably should have offered to sell them light bulbs before you left. I got hired to work support for a security hardware company that neglected to mention I would be randomly calling people in an attempt to sell said hardware. When it was finally mentioned halfway through the training, I stood up and walked out. I got a job at a greenhouse and was told that I should be able to lift up to 50 pounds. I said that was no problem, I'm a small lady but I lift weights, and my deadlift is respectable. It turns out that lifting isn't really a large part of the job. Most of it is pulling these half-ton racks of plants with shitty wheels on uneven pavement. When you finally yank them hard enough to get them going, you will likely have to stop them suddenly when some customer walks in front of you. I was going to tough it out, but it was a back injury waiting to happen. Everyone else in my department were really big guys. I'm not sure why they thought I'd be a good fit. Be able to lift up to 50 pounds? They asked that because that's a legal question to ask, and it'll weed out people who don't want to or can't do physical labor. I mean, they can't very well ask, are you willing to violate OSHA safety standards for $8 an hour? Got a job as a collections agent while living in Reno. I knew it would be a horrible job, but I needed the money. Walked in the door, and listened to my new boss regaling everyone with his story of prostitutes and strippers, because hey, Nevada. One of the other employees said, how does your wife feel about that? To which my boss replied, you know women, they're all too stupid to leave. Sorry, not this woman. Walked right out again, and never looked back. Back in college, I took a part-time job at Marshall's, a clothing store. They were showing me around and introducing me to people, and this oldest lady smiles at me and says, I've been working here for 10 years. And she was missing a bunch of her teeth. Anyway, I go through the whole first shift and it was hella boring. They wanted me to literally sort through every hanger of clothes by pushing them from right to left every day before I could go home. At the end of the shift, I just kept seeing that lady's face and missing teeth and hearing 10 years. 10 years. 10 years. Echoing in my mind, so I quit. Yes. I did a trial shift as a care worker for the elderly. For some reason I didn't compute that a care home is a place people go to die, sad face. About 3 hours in, someone died, and I saw the body. I have never smelled something so strange or been so overwhelmed. Threw up, cried, and never went back. Obligatory, I didn't quit, I caused my trainee to quit. At the end of shift where I was working, washing motorheads with an industrial 20-ton washer, we empty a filter and replace it. When doing this, a ton of steam and presumably bad chemicals tends to lick your face. I told the kid to be extra careful not to breathe it in, as it could kill you within minutes. He clocked out and never came back. TLDR, I'm a dick and told some kid he would die if he did something as a prank. He quit. Worked tilde for hours at a Tim Hortons. I went in for the interview and they hired me on the spot, should have been the first warning. I got put in a uniform, given a tour, started watching training videos. Learned that I had to complete said training videos on my own time, without pay, and I couldn't take them home to watch either. Got home, called to tell them I wouldn't be coming in for another shift and dropped off my uniform the next day. Also, during the interview, the manager asked me what I like to do for fun and then told me I wouldn't have time for that anymore. Got hired at Popeyes. Was told I had to shave even though I never handled fully revealed food, only once it was packaged, I was on drive-through. I even offered to buy my own beard net and explained to them I have god-awful skin that gets cut easily and gets infected, but they held firm. Then I was offered to work with family, so I said screw it, their food wasn't great anyways. Mind you, I interviewed with my beard and trimmed it down with a hash 1/8 of an inch before coming into work. On top of that, instead of training me, they threw me on drive-through and told me to figure it out because the manager didn't believe in hand-holding. I was a waitress at an assisted living facility for all of one shift. Patients could order food off a limited menu. I thought I'd just be serving food, which would have been fine, but we were told that we needed to know the patient's dietary restrictions too, i.e. if the patient ordered French fries, but was on a low-sodium diet, we were the ones who needed to substitute what they wanted with something they were allowed to eat. At 17, I didn't want to be held responsible if grandma had a heart attack. Also, the management decided to make all shifts mandatory doubles midway through my first shift because turnover was so high. So 16 hours on my feet didn't make me too happy. Everyone who started with me left within 2 weeks. I lasted the whole shift but quit that night. Tire changing shop. Extremely racist, thought I was also racist or didn't mind because I was also white, but it really bothered me enough to leave after lunch. I didn't tell anyone other than my parents, but I don't recommend anyone to go there. I worked for a tax company 2 winters ago and quit after an hour. My job was to stand outside dressed as the Statue of Liberty with a big arrow. I had a few layers on, but this was a really bad winter, and I'm a pretty scrawny guy. I went in after an hour for a break and just told my manager I'm not coming back. I got a job at a grocery store in high school. It paid $8 per hour, and they started me at 4:30 a.m. for a 4-hour shift. I stocked shelves until 7 o'clock a.m. and then I got a call for an interview at a sawmill, which started put at $22 per hour. I finished my totally worth it 4 hour for 30 AM shift and got asked if I wanted to do another 4 hours. I said no thanks and left. I called the grocery store that afternoon and said I wouldn't be coming back. I worked at that sawmill for 6 years and then I got a trade. No regrets. My very first job ever was telemarketing. As soon as I had the script in my hand, I knew what I was doing was perpetuating a scam. Went outside for a cigarette and never came back. Called a consumer protection line on them, though I never knew what came of it. Cashier. Did all the training and learned all the codes, then started my first shift. It was strange, all of a sudden I could just see my entire life turning into shit. Something about hauling a bunch of people's groceries all day long along a conveyor belt and inputting data at the same time made me want to quit instantly. That was like 15 years ago, and to this day, I admire the shit out of the people that do that because I can't handle that. Worked as a Little League umpire when I was somewhere around 16. We had a brief training day where we didn't really go over the rules so much as go over what our responsibilities were. Started umpiring the next day, I think. Almost walked off the field crying mid-game after being yelled at by the coach of one team for some admittedly bad calls. Managed to come back and finish the game, but told the head umpire that they would need to find someone else for the afternoon game. Low confidence and mediocre knowledge of Little League rules don't mix well with unreasonably angry parents. Not the worst job I ever had, I guess, but I definitely did not want to work there another second. I coached Little League football for a number of years. The kids are great. The parents suck. On one occasion, the head coach of the team I was coaching had to remind the parents that I was there as a volunteer. I had no kids on the team, just did it because I enjoyed it, and, as such, treating me like shit was not an option. A second time, I had 2 police officers approach me after a game saying they were there to escort me to my car as a threat against me had been made. Parents are insane. I was hired to be a receptionist, but while I was being shown around someone mentioned, "Oh, and if an angry customer ever gets violent, just lock yourself in the bathroom and call the police." We already installed a phone in there. Left at lunch and never looked back. I quit a job selling life insurance after the first day. I took the job as I was told in my 3 interviews that I would be given referrals for sales and that I would be paid a salary for the first year. On the first day, I discovered that I wouldn't receive a paycheck for my first 3 months and that I had to go door to door to get my so-called referrals. The whole thing seemed way too shady, so I cut and run. Yes. At a pizza place. I couldn't throw the dough around properly and had no inclination to learn. And when I checked the schedule, I noticed that they'd actually scheduled me for the few times I couldn't work over the next 2 weeks. I taught dance classes and I couldn't skip out. That's the sort of job you can't just skip out on every once in a while, and they knew I had that job when they hired me. I just never went back. Was a dumb teenager who didn't know how to handle the situation properly. However, they make great pizza, and as an adult I go there often. I hope they don't remember the dumb teenage me who worked there for 1 shift. Carpenter tripped while trussing because a year 2 put down some planks on the wall edge. He blamed me. Threw a framing hammer at my head from 2 stories up. Overhand fastball pitch style. I remember the feeling of the air pushing against my face. The sound of the crunch when it smashed into the floor. The cratered plywood flooring. The haft over my foot. I was 17. It was one of the first times I felt helplessly fearful. I cried and quit. Midway through the 4th day. I was at a dealership, starting a new job as a service advisor. The other 3 guys training me were in fierce competition because it was incredibly sales-driven. They would step over their own mothers to make a buck. Services that weren't really needed were being recommended because it affected their bottom line. On the Thursday, I asked to speak to the boss and said I couldn't do this. I didn't say, "I can't rip people off," but told him the job wasn't for me and left. Had 2 months and a wicked summer off. Hired to sell cleaning supplies for a subsidiary of Berkshire Hathaway. Told weekly pay over $1,000 on average. First day of training I learned it was door-to-door Kirby vacuum sales, never went back. One manager told me the wrong time to come in. I showed up when I was told I was supposed to. Apparently, I was late. I was sent home. Before I left, the other manager told me not to trust anyone that works there. Decided that it probably wasn't the best place for me. Got a job in a call center. First day in training was with a bunch of Pakistani guys who made my day hell. I'm a half Chinese female. The question started, you got a Chinese takeout? Do you do kung fu? Then got progressively worse sexual. Walked out at the end of the day and didn't go back. Boss was a demeaning, condescending asshole who treated his one-man cleaning staff like a slave. He would yell at him, call him stupid or slow, and wouldn't let him eat food in the same room as the other employees. He'd have to eat his lunch in a vacant apartment alone. I never went to work another shift and went to the lake for a week instead. During the summer in college, I got a job at a local factory inspecting tampon applicators. One other guy worked in the department, and he was thrilled to have another guy start. I felt bad for quitting, but even cleaning chicken coops was a more enjoyable job. My buddy got me a job where he worked at a fruit-veggie processing plant. I'm not sure exactly what to call it, so I'll go with that. It was graveyard shift and he bragged about how great it was. And it was, for him. He got to screw around and drive forklifts and basically do little work. I got placed on a conveyor belt placing lids on buckets full of berries between numerous old ladies who didn't speak a lick of English. It was the longest night of my life. I never went back. I worked at a Burger King for a full 8 hours. It was my depressing manager that ultimately got me to quit. He was a balding man in his 40s. Very nice, but you couldn't help but pity him. In the midst of training, he looked up at me over a pit of fries, heat lamp reflecting from his slightly sweaty skin, and said, "You are Furcifer 89, if you can do this, then you can do anything." I just never went back after that. I didn't want to find him strung up in the freezer one day. Starting college as an 18-year-old and decided I wanted a part-time job at the university bakery. Decided that working at 5:30 a.m. would be fun, worked one day, and then respectfully quit the following day. I took a job in a shipping department for a mail order company. Take the things out of a tub, pack in a box, tape closed, repeat. I needed a job at the time, but I could not do this all day long for 8 hours. I went to lunch and never came back. I didn't even get to fill out the HR paperwork, as I was supposed to do that after lunch because it was a Monday and they were in a meeting first thing in the morning. I can't even remember if I got paid for the 4 hours. I discovered I can't do mindless work. I need some problem solving and some creativity, and possibly variety. Target. Went through the first day of orientation, and the moment we did a cheer at the end, and them bragging about their security camera that the FBI uses them, tone was that of just try and steal from us. Glad they went under in Canada. Worked for a painting company for one day. The entire crew was using and trading selling drugs at the work site. I told the owner of the company that I appreciated the opportunity and I'd be happy to work for him in the future if he had any jobs where the environment was different, but he basically told me, "Dude, it's painting. This is how it is." The owners had audio cameras everywhere and called at least 6 or 7 times during my 8-hour shift to complain about something. It was just an uncomfortable environment and the employees were too scared to speak freely, so there was little to no talking. I worked for one day as a bridal consultant. All the other workers there, even the manager, were awful. Every time they walked away from a bride they talked shit about her. They were also all mean to each other and the manager yelled constantly. The one worker there who was nice seemed to get the most shit from others. After seeing my future, I never returned for my second day. I worked at Hardee's for 3 hours. They said since I was 18, I was old enough to slice the meat, so I'd be the meat slicer, not exclusively, but I was really too short for the machine, so I didn't want to slice it. Plus the decor was brown. And it was boring. I never went back. Or got my check. I worked for an airplane reconditioning company. Stripped down old planes and rebuild them, mostly private jets. I quit after one day when I learned 12 of the chemicals we used were known to cause cancer. Got a job at a pub, was told to wear black shoes with a slight heel. Showed up and was given literally no instructions. I just stood around and occasionally an angry Russian lady would yell at me for not doing things properly even though I was never told what to do. At one point I was told to just load the dishwasher in the smelliest kitchen I've ever been in. I was literally gagging from the smell. The new boots I'd bought for the job eventually started to hurt so much I could barely walk. The customers seemed to mostly be old snobby rich dudes who openly insulted me. Sometimes my angry Russian boss would show up and join in. I asked what hours I was working and never got a straight answer. When they sent me on my lunch break, I left and never went back. In the 80s, I worked at a phone bank attempting to sell donations for a police benevolent group. I got a minimum wage, plus a commission for any sale I made. Invariably, I got 3 types of response: no one picked up the phone, got cursed out for attempting to make an unsolicited sale, or made a sale after talking to lonely-sounding people. Within the first half hour working the phones, I hated the job. Within 2 hours, this turned into abhorrence. Within 3 hours, I quit. Worked at a new job because they were offering me 50% more than what I was currently making, and I'd get to do all advanced tasks. First day, I get told I have to make a wage that was 70% below what I was promised for 90 days, then he can pitch a raise to the previously promised amount. I also got slapped onto entry duties as well. Went to lunch, never came back. I applied for a marketing position as a teenager, gave my notice in for my previous job, and spent those 2 weeks looking forward to my new first proper job. End up door-to-door selling, something that really doesn't fit my personality. Also, I found out it was 100% commission. After paying for my train journey to get from the office to the selling area, spending 10 hours getting rejected door-to-door, then getting back to the office and expected to do some role-play training, I just quit. Good life lesson though. Please consider subscribing if you enjoyed. Love.